Graphics cards, Polaris, Pascal. We got the RX 480, the champion of the people. We got the GTX 1080, irresponsible amount of power. And we've got the new Titan X coming this August. It's so much to be excited about. There's so much power. You get more frames for your money than ever before. We have to live in the best time of our lives to be PC gamers, to be buying new hardware, right? I'm actually going to contest that point a little bit and tell you why I think this generation of not only graphics cards, but some of the technological trends here in the past year or two are kind of concerning to me. So welcome everyone to why I'm not impressed with Pascal or Polaris yet. As usual with these bullshit type of videos I do, I'll have something in the background for you all to watch if you're into that thing. It may not even be PC gameplay, ironically enough, but it is what it is. And if you hear click-clacking in the background, it's either a keyboard or a controller because I like to play games when I'm talking about this kind of stuff. So, let's jump right in, shall we? So, as I had mentioned previously, we're just coming right hot off the heels of brand new graphics card releases from both AMD and NVIDIA. We have the GTX 10 series, 10 gaming perfected from NVIDIA, and we have the RX series from AMD, including the 480, 470, and 460. Now, before I start getting into the dissenting points of this video, let me say, starting out, that there are some badass graphics cards for the money on both sides of the fence here. For instance, the GTX 1070 is really basically a GTX 980 Ti that performs a little bit better, has 2 gigs of VRAM more, which is a little bit faster by the way, and comes in at a whopping $200 less, even for the Founders Edition. You can get them as low as $390. That's fucking awesome. On the other side, you have the RX 480 from AMD, which costs only anywhere from $200 to $240-ish if you're looking at the 8 gig VRAM versions. And those things perform a little bit better than a GTX 970. And we're talking $100 less or more than the launch cost of a GTX 970, which is just amazing. So for those that have been waiting since, say, the GTX 600 series or the AMD 7000 series graphics cards, now is probably the best time in recent history to upgrade because you're getting really good performance comparable to last generation for, you know, as much as 25 to 30% less cost. It's really compelling. But let me repeat one of those phrases I said there. Last generation. This is where that whole positivity thing starts to break down for me personally. I think it's wonderful that really good performing technology is available for the masses at a lower price, but as someone who is worried about the future and really highly demanding games, I want to see what's on the enthusiast end. I want to see what's the cutting, bleeding edge that's going to be either pushing everything down or pulling everything up because of it. So let's take a look at the enthusiast options, shall we? On the NVIDIA side, we have the GTX 1080, which clocks in at over 1700 megahertz by the time it boost clocks. It's about 20% faster than a 1070, and yet costs well more than 20% more. The Founders Edition comes in at $700 versus the GTX 1070 $450-ish. So we're looking at a pretty much the same price to performance gap that we saw last generation with the 980 and 970. You're actually better going off with just 2 SLI 1070s. You're not spending that much more and you get way more frame rate for your money that way, even including all the bullshit you have to deal with SLI. Now on the AMD side of things, we have there are no enthusiast options from AMD right now. The closest thing to that we have are the R9 Fury X and R9 Fury cards that are admittedly last generation cards. Even then, at the time of release of the R9 Fury X and R9 Fury, they still didn't compare to the top tier cards of NVIDIA. The R9 Fury X released at about an MSRP of $650, but compared to the also $650 GTX 980 Ti, which mind you overclocked better on even reference coolers, it didn't make any sense for that price point because the 980 Ti not only had 2 gigs more VRAM, even though it was technically slower and had a lot less bandwidth than the HBM on the Fury X card, but it performed about 10 to 20% better across pretty much all resolutions and settings unless you got to 4K, where that HBM would actually kick it up a little bit and the gap would decrease. As a result, AMD actually cut the prices of pretty much all the Fury products. So the R9 Fury X is closer to $500 nowadays, and the regular Fury can be as low as the R9 390 and 390X. So right now we're talking the highest tier card from AMD right now is only really a competitor against the GTX 980 in the price to performance range, which by the way is already being eclipsed by the GTX 1060 in some cases, coming in at well under half the price, and even then the RX 480, even though it doesn't perform as well, is still a much better buy for the money. So AMD, just like the past couple of generations, minus the 295 X2, are pretty much sitting there with their dick in their hands with no enthusiast options whatsoever. And here's where that first critical issue arises in this little storyboard for me. AMD and NVIDIA are currently competing in very separate markets right now. The only time they somewhat overlap this generation is the GTX 1060 and the RX 480. Even then, the 1060 does perform quite a bit better and costs quite a bit more. Matter of fact, disproportionately more. But it's still not a bad buy. You just get a few more frames for your dollar out of a RX 480. But from there on out, you just get charged more and more for every card you go up. The 1070s are really other good bang for your buck, just like the 970 the generation beforehand. When you go to the 1080, you're just being charged the premium tax to say that you have the 1080. Things are only going to get worse this August when the new Titan X releases. Don't even get me started on that stupid fucking name, because why would you name it the same thing as last generation? This is worse than the new 3DS or whatever bullshit that Nintendo likes to pull. But with the new Titan X, we're talking about a $1,200 single GPU card. Let me repeat that one more time. A $1,200 single GPU card. All other Titans leading up to this point have cost $1,000 MSRP, with the first three Titans being the original Titan, Titan Black, and Titan Z, which are just two Titans Blacks on one PCB. All of those were compute cards at the same time, not just gaming cards. That's why they carried that $1,000 price point. Yeah, they were the king of gaming and you were paying the premium for it. They had an absorbent amount of VRAM on them for the time, 6 gigabytes each. But you also had that double floating point precision. So yeah, they were a lot cheaper than a Quadro. So, smaller companies could afford to buy those, or enthusiasts for video gaming could afford, to spend that and say, hey, look at me, I have a Titan now. With a Titan X, they ditched the double floating point precision and yet still charge $1,000. People saw this as, that's not too bad because it actually performs about 50% better than a GTX 980, and they slapped on 8 gigs of VRAM more for a total of 12, which is pretty insane. So you SLI 2 or 3 of those, you have the only thing that could run 4K at above 60 FPS at the time. So enthusiasts pretty much ate the tax. Now with the new Titan X, we're talking $1,200, a card that is 60% faster, supposedly, than the previous Titan X. See why this is confusing? Because I say Titan X, both fucking products. But there just feels like there's a lot of missing features when you're getting charged $200 more than the previous enthusiast flagship model of card. For instance, the new Titan X still has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Instead of GDDR5, it is now GDDR5X with a effective clock of 10,000 megahertz versus 7,000 megahertz. And that sounds great, right? But we were all promised at some point HBM2, which is going to kick the shit out of HBM1, which is already awesome, increase capacity, and eliminate any possibility of bottlenecking the power of your GPU because of limited VRAM bandwidth. Now don't get me wrong, GDDR5X does kick ass, and it's a lot better than regular, but when you're shilling out $1,200 for a single graphics card that's only going to be 25 to 30% faster than the next one down at the time, the 1080, I want everything. You better throw in cocaine and hookers at that point. I mean, come on, $1,200? At that point, I'll just SLI 1070s for way less than $1,200 and end up getting the same, if not more, frame rate from it. I understand there's technical issues. There haven't been yields with HBM2 that would actually permit, NVIDIA to manufacture shit with it. But on that same token, doesn't it seem a little fucking soon to be putting out a Titan anyway? The 1080, 1070, and 1060 literally just came out. Last generation, the 980 and 970 released late September, and the Titan wasn't announced until March. Where that was a nearly 6-month gap, we're talking less than a 3-month gap between the release of the 1080 and the announcement of the Titan. All the while AMD is sitting over on the other side of the fence with nothing but mid-range cards, hoping that the mid-range mainstream gaming audience will keep them afloat. So what's the moral of this story? Well, because AMD has absolutely no competition to NVIDIA in their enthusiast market, NVIDIA can just do whatever the hell it wants. I've expressed in the past many times, I am not an NVIDIA nor AMD fanboy. I use NVIDIA products mostly, but I would like to see a more fair and balanced market share between the two. So when I see NVIDIA do shit like raise their flagship tier card price by $200, when I see them exclude SLI fingers on 1060s because they know as well as we do that if you SLI two 1060s, it would beat a 1080 for almost half the cost. When I see them rush these cards out the door before they could have made something really great and really drive the innovation home that we expected from this release, then I get a little bit angry at NVIDIA, but more so angry at AMD because it's their responsibility really to keep NVIDIA on their fucking toes. But the sad state of affairs is that NVIDIA has so much more R&D budget, so many more resources that they just can keep cranking shit out. And because they're going unopposed in this very niche market that charges exorbitantly high prices for these cards, they can get away with it. There's no competition between the two. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me all that much if we don't see a 1050 or 1050 Ti release for another year or so. NVIDIA would much rather have those people who are on the border just go ahead and drop the $250-ish on a 1060 rather than save a few bucks on a 1050 or 1050 Ti. Their strategy is to just let AMD push everyone to their more higher end cards because, hey, you're already halfway there, just spend a little bit more money and you'll be in the real deal. You know, this is the big boy spot over here. So big reason number one I'm not impressed with Pascal or Polaris yet is that there's no competition. AMD's just pushing out stuff that is comparable to last generation tech, which is not a bad thing. That means that you'll get good performance for a better price. But as I said previously, that's not pushing the envelope. That's not something that people really get pumped for. What about the people that still own a 970 or a 390, a 780, a 290? There's nothing to upgrade to on the AMD side. You're just going to get the same performance. If anything, you'd only be able to sell your used card for the same amount of money that a new 480 would cost. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense. On the other side, NVIDIA just goes so unopposed that they can charge whatever they want for their cards, put whatever specs they want on it, and be unchallenged. Those people that I previously mentioned with mid-range to high-end cards from previous generations, if they want to upgrade right now, you have to go NVIDIA. There's no choice. And then there are people like me who have high-end cards, enthusiast-grade cards from generations past that always wait on the flagship or the, top-tier card that makes the most sense for that generation. Last generation, it was the 980 Ti that blew our fucking minds because it was $350 less for a Titan X and was negligibly less powerful. We're talking 1 to 3% frame per second difference. 6 gigs of VRAM, absolutely beast of a card for the cost. If you were going to buy a new 900 card, it was either the 970 or 980 Ti most of the time. Then comes along the new Titan X with its $1,200 price tag. What do you think that's going to do to the 1080 Ti, if there is one at this point? Well, that's at least going to raise the price tag by $200. So what used to be $650, $700, all the way up to $750, I believe, for the 780 Ti, we're talking an $800, $850 graphics card at minimum. NVIDIA just keeps charging more and more for the premium tax. I understand, this is electronics, there's a lot of R&D cost in this, but they wouldn't be able to get away with this if AMD, on the other side, had put out something to challenge them on it. That's what competition's about. It's good for the consumer, and right now we just do not have it. The second thing I've been really unimpressed with this launch is that for about every product that NVIDIA's put out so far, maybe not the 1060 to some extent, but the 1070 and 1080 for sure, have mostly been paper launches. Just like the 970 and 980 before it, just like the Titan X and the 980 Ti, you just couldn't find the damn cards the first week they released. I can't tell you how much I sat in the engineering commons on my college campus, hitting the refresh button on that goddamn shopping website tracker bullshit app thing, just to see if 970s had come in stock yet. NVIDIA is notorious for this. This is far from the first time that they've been accused of paper launching products, where they say it's out and you never can find it. 10 people will get it, and then whatever supplier had it is just gone now. AMD, on the other hand, launches the 480, 470, and 460 with an abundant amount of supplies. Pretty much everyone that wanted one was able to get one within a reasonable time period. Maybe they'd have to wait a few days or a week for it to come back, but it would come back in a reasonable time period. I can go right now, though, on Amazon.com and look, and a majority of the GTX 1070s are well above the MSRP recommended price for what they are. Why is that? Because there's people buying them up and then reselling them for higher because no one else has them. Could you stop doing this, NVIDIA? I'm so sick and tired of seeing this every time a new product is launched. And just as I mentioned earlier, because AMD has nothing to show for it, they have no competition, NVIDIA is just going to keep doing it. I've worked in manufacturing plants. I understand that there are difficulties with getting out a product, especially a new product, especially something so volatile as silicon chips. But don't say you have something when you don't have it. Delay the launch. Quit planning launches when you get the fucking manufacturing line up and running for one day. Build some inventory. Quit enabling people to pre-order 5 or 6 at a time from different accounts, and then they get them all and sell them for a $200 profit on Amazon just because there's people who are impatient. Just hold on. Let people fucking wait a little bit and give them, actually provide them with product. My third and final biggest complaint with this generation in particular is thermals and overclocking. Now, I certainly never bought into this media-fueled bullshit of people somehow getting the idea that NVIDIA and AMD were saying, oh, like heat problems are a thing of the past. We're able to run 200 FPS at 60 degrees on a reference cooler on full load. No, they never showed that. You people interpreted that by seeing a pre-rendered thing. They never claimed it. We jumped to conclusions way too quick. So even though I never bought into that, or expected there to be a huge gain with that, there's always some thought in the back of my mind thinking, hey, we're going to a smaller node, we're going to 14 and 16 nanometers, we're talking efficiency here, maybe there are some opportunity for better overclocking headroom, maybe better thermals, let's see. However, what happens when you shrink nodes is that you get electrons flowing closer to each other, so you're actually concentrating all that heat into a smaller package. Between that and with what I feel like are basically inadequate coolers on a lot of these cards, if you ask me, the stock cooler for what they have on the 1070 and 1080 are barely good enough. And the RX 480 being so loud, I think they need an upgrade on that as well. But a lot of these cards are releasing not only hot and loud, but with basically no headroom to go any higher than what they're clocked. For instance, one of the custom PCB 1080s from Asus actually GPU boosts itself up to a certain range, and any attempt to go over that is pretty much a death sentence. You're never going to get it faster than a few megahertz than what it has set by default. One could look at this information and think, hey, that's great, because the manufacturer's done it all for me. They've, pushed it to the limit, that way I don't have to. That may be the case with some cards, but with a lot of these, it seems like you're actually just hitting the thermal wall a lot quicker than you're hitting the capacity to hit its max core clock. Now, the cards that are releasing from, say, EVGA or Asus, you're probably not going to hit that thermal wall because they have a lot better coolers on them. But the other wall that you're probably going to run into anyway is voltage. A lot of these cards just cannot go past a certain voltage range before they become unstable. So we have on one end overclockers that are thinking, well, shit, the card is as good as it's ever going to get out of the box. That kind of sucks. But on the other end, you have people that just want everyday use, probably thinking, oh my God, if I try to overclock this or put another 0.1 volts on this thing, it's going to burn up. I'm running so close to the limit already that any attempt to even try to change anything, I'm scared shitless to. Meanwhile, in my 980 Ti sitting in a mini ITX build, mind you, I have a 300 megahertz overclock with a minimal voltage change sitting pretty at less than 70 degrees Celsius with basically the fan curve being turned up maybe 15% on each one. Is it whisper quiet? No. But is it safe? Yeah. And I still have a lot of headroom. If I splurged on some liquid cooling, imagine what I'd be able to, achieve with it then. So at the end of the day, it's just really not only disappointing that what we get out of the box is what we get, and we pretty much have no hopes for overclocking, at least on the 1080 and 1070 side. And on the 480, we basically have no room because of a mixture of thermals and voltage. But more importantly, we have people living in this constant fear that if I accidentally crank up something or if I play around with this just a little too much, I'm going to burn up my card because we're sitting here on the edge of the precipice of dying anyway. Now, is this entirely true on every product out there? No. More than likely, they're safe and they're going to last you for several years to come. But it's certainly an uncomfortable trend for people who like to have a little bit of a safety buffer, who would rather, play it safe and sit back and lose a few frames than risk their cards overheating or have a voltage regulator module blow up in your face because you just put it up a couple millivolts too much. So as the Pascal and Polaris situation lines up right now, we basically have one company sitting as a monopoly for enthusiast side. We have one company who is selling very good hardware at a value budget, but isn't innovating whatsoever besides in some nice trickery software they're using for user interfaces when it comes to monitors and VR tech, which is great, but hardware should come first, in my opinion. We have those enthusiast products that are out, barely being available, even to this day. And then we have that all the products that are out basically have no room for improvement. What you get is what you get. And all this talks of efficiency, all this focus on having one power cable or this nice looking cooler because it's all flashy and it's triangles and shit, barely being adequate to cool the card. You have barely no headroom to overclock or overvolt. It's just not trends that are comfortable to see in a modern GPU market. Now, is it the end of the world today? Absolutely not. If you're building a new computer, you can go out and buy a 480 or a 1060 for kick-ass 1080p gaming, even really good 1440p gaming. You can buy a 1070 for amazing 1440p gaming. You buy a 1080 or wait on the new Titan if you have just money out your ass. You'll have the ultimate 4K experience today, which is awesome. But there are trends that are happening right now that weren't as exaggerated in the past. I just don't want to see us continue on these paths. I want to be able to go on forums and watch YouTube videos of people with their 1080 Ti's or Titan X's, the new Titan X's that is, with insane almost 75%, 100% overclocks on liquid cooling. I want to see people just rag the fuck out of their computer because they can. That's what being PC gamers is all about. We don't always do the shit that makes the most sense for the money sometimes, but we'll do it to push limits. We'll do it because we can, and we do it because we have options. And this kind of stuff is just limiting our options. The lack of competition hurts price points. The lack of availability of products hurts potential buyers. And the lack of reliable overclocking or voltage overhead or core clock overhead kind of limits trust in your consumers and enthusiast markets. So overall, is this still a great time to upgrade if you have an older card and, it's biting the dust and you're looking for something to breathe new life into your PC build? Absolutely. Go fucking crazy. But as someone who still owns tech from the past couple generations of graphics cards, I don't see anything that makes me wish I would wait. And I think that's my biggest disappointment. I was kind of hoping to say, fuck, I wish I would have waited. There's nothing that says, for the money you spent, you could have waited another couple months and gotten bleeding edge technology for the same price. There's nothing that says that you missed out, that you're not playing the games the same way we are because you jumped the gun. Which is a good thing for people that still have older stuff, because that means they could probably wait a little longer. But isn't it nice to have something to look forward to? Isn't it nice to have an ascension plan, a plan to go forward, to go bigger? And I just don't have one right now. So I hope either AMD or NVIDIA, or both preferably, will come out with something kick-ass at the right price that'll make me excited about hardware again this generation. But right now, I'm just not. And I'm certainly not getting my hopes up for Zen or Intel's new offerings. At this rate, I'm going to keep my current rig until it just fucking explodes on me, because there's just nothing that is that compelling right now. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my opinion of the current state of Polaris and Pascal. As I said before, there's still some kick-ass products out there, but there's some concerning trends that I hope to see eliminated before we go forward. And, maybe NVIDIA or AMD will get a fat wad of cash by next generation. They better hope so. Thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you later in more nerdy tech talk like this. Bye-bye.